Hello everyone, and welcome to another video here on Self-Sufficiency with Johnny Lee. First of all, as always, I want to say thank you to everyone who has been watching, subscribing, commenting, even when you disagree. Whether you love what I say or it makes you uncomfortable, the fact that you're thinking means I've done my job. Now, in the last video, we've dealt with this tired old claim. Atheists don't have morality. We broke that down. We talked about how civilized societies create rules to reduce harm, protect people, and keep things from turning into chaos. And you don't need a sky god to figure out that murder and rape are bad ideas. Today I want to take that a step further, because religious people don't just say you need God for morality. They go a step further and claim our holy book is the source of morality. Without the Bible, without the Qur'an, without the Torah, people wouldn't even know what right and wrong are. And today, I am here to tell you that is simply not true. So the message today is very simple. Religion didn't invent morality. I'm going to show you, using history, that human beings were making moral codes long before Judaism, Christianity, or Islam ever showed up. Let's start with something very basic. You don't need a PhD to figure this out. Just imagine human beings living together in a village thousands of years ago. If people could kill whoever they wanted, that village wouldn't last long. If people could steal whenever they wanted, nobody would grow crops, nobody would build anything, because what's the point? If men could just take whatever woman they wanted by force, you'd have endless blood feuds and society would collapse. You don't need a revelation from heaven to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't let people do that. You just need common sense and self-interest. If I don't want to be killed, then maybe we should say killing is wrong. If I don't want my stuff stolen, maybe we should say stealing is wrong. If I don't want my body violated, maybe we should protect other people's bodies too. That's morality at the most basic level. It's what helps a group survive and suffer less. And guess what? Humans figured that out long before the Bible, the Qur'an, or the Torah. Let's talk about a name religious folks don't like to bring up in church. That's Hammurabi. This was a king in ancient Mesopotamia about 1700 years before Jesus, hundreds of years before the supposed time of Moses. Under his rule, they carved laws into stone, an entire law code for society. What kind of things were in there? Laws about murder and the punishment for it. Laws about theft and restitution. Laws about injury, property, contracts, and even false accusations. In other words, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie in court. And if you harm someone, there are consequences. Now tell me, does that sound familiar? Religious people act like the 10 Commandments were this brand new moral revelation dropped from heaven on stone tablets. No, people were already saying, don't murder your neighbor, don't steal his stuff, don't lie about him in court. Because if you don't have those rules, civilization doesn't work. So when a Christian or a Muslim says, without God's law, people wouldn't know right from wrong, I have to ask, so what were humans doing before your religion existed? Just wandering around murdering each other for fun until your book came out? History says otherwise. Let's move to ancient Kemet, what we now call Egypt. Long before Christianity, long before Islam, long before European colonizers started waving Bibles around, the Egyptians had a whole concept called ma'at, truth, balance, justice, order. They also had what we often call the negative confessions. Moral statements like, I have not stolen, I have not killed, I have not lied, I have not caused pain without reason. Sound familiar again? You've got an ancient African civilization long before the Bible was finalized saying, a good person is someone who doesn't steal, doesn't murder, doesn't lie, doesn't cheat people. So again, morality existed. Africans weren't sitting around saying, gosh, if only a Middle Eastern religion would show up and tell us it's wrong to kill people. They already understood that a stable society requires restraint, responsibility, and respect for others. Now let's leave Africa and go to China, 500 years before the time Jesus supposedly walked the earth. You've got a philosopher named Confucius teaching something that should sound very familiar. He basically says, what you do not wish for yourself, do not do to others. That is a version of the Golden Rule, centuries before the Sermon on the Mount. So when Christians act like Jesus invented, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, no, humans were already thinking in those terms. Why? Because we live in groups. We interact. We need each other. And over time, people figured out, if I treat people the way I want to be treated, this society works better. Again, no angel had to float down with a scroll to explain that. Empathy plus experience is enough to get you there. So let's put this together. Hammurabi's laws in Mesopotamia before the Bible. Ma'at and the moral codes in Kemet before the Bible and the Qur'an. Confucius and the Golden Rule before Jesus. What does that tell you? It tells you that moral ideas were already in circulation. Do not murder, do not steal, do not lie, do not abuse the vulnerable, treat others the way you want to be treated. So what did the later religions do? They copied the homework. They took existing human wisdom, mixed it with tribal laws, added supernatural threats and rewards, heaven, hell, curses, blessings, and then said, this is the only true morality. Everything else is filthy rags. No, the reality is, morality is older than your book. Morality is bigger than your book. Morality is not owned by any religion. Religion is just one of the many ways humans tried to package rules and control behavior. Now at this point, a religious person will say, okay, but without God, what's the foundation of morality? How do you say something is really wrong? As if the only possible foundation is because my God said so. Let me ask you something. If your God suddenly said, murder is fine now, would it magically become good? If your God said, owning slaves is righteous, does that suddenly make it moral? Because your holy books did allow slavery. Your holy books did command killings. Your holy books did bless child sacrifice in some places and genocide in others. So if your foundation is it's right because God said it, you don't have morality, you have obedience. You're not asking, is this good for human beings? You're asking, is this what my deity demands? Atheists, secular people, we flip that. We ask, does this reduce suffering? Does this protect people from harm? Does this help individuals and societies function better? Does this respect autonomy and consent? That's a real foundation. That's something we can argue about, improve, refine, and apply. I don't need a verse for that. I just need empathy, reason, and evidence. So let me bring this home, children. Because some of you watching this grew up the way I did, believing that without Jesus, without the Bible, without church, you would be some wild animal without a conscience. But look at reality. The same religious people who scream that atheists have no morality, cheat on their spouses, exploit their congregations, defend genocides in their holy books, and say, well, if God commanded it, it must be good. That is not moral superiority. That is moral outsourcing. You handed your conscience to a book and said, whatever this says is good, I will call good, even if it violates everything my gut and common sense are screaming. Meanwhile, human beings long before your religion were already saying, don't murder, don't steal, don't lie, don't abuse other people. So I came here today to tell you, stop acting like your religion wrote morality from scratch, because it didn't. It borrowed from older law codes, older philosophies, older civilizations, and then wrapped it in fear and faith. Morality doesn't belong to priests, imams, rabbis, or pastors. Morality belongs to all of us. Anytime a human being looks at another human being and says, you feel pain like I do, let me not inflict unnecessary harm on you. That, ladies and gentlemen, is morality. No pulpit required. So where does that leave you? If you're leaving religion or you're questioning it, it leaves you with responsibility. You don't get to say, well, God said it, that settles it. No, you have to think. Weigh the consequences. Consider other people's suffering. Be honest about your motives. That's harder than outsourcing your conscience to a verse. But it's more honest and more human. You don't need to be terrified that without religion you'll suddenly turn into a monster. If you already care about harm, fairness, and honesty, that's your moral sense, not something injected by a church sermon. Religion didn't invent morality. You did. We did. Together, as a species, slowly, painfully through history. And you, as a self-sufficient human being, have the power to live by that morality without bowing to a throne in the sky. I thank you for listening. If this has helped you think, if it challenged the story you were told about morality and God, then feel free to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's wrestling with these questions. And remember what I always tell you. No one is coming to save you. Not Yahweh, not Jesus, not Allah, not any book. You have to save yourself by thinking clearly, living honestly, and refusing to let ancient fear control your modern life. Until next time.